think if we are asking short-term missionaries to have some sort of lasting impact in a place, we're asking for the wrong thing.
Buongiorno. You're listening to Going, Where God is at Work, a podcast that sits at the intersection of missions theory and practice. We're walking out our call to ministry in faraway places and happy to have you join us on the journey. I'm your host, Jesse Pauli, a missions leader serving in Rome, and I'm here with Alessandro Di Leonardo, a church planter in Cisterna di Latina, and Jen Williamson, a missiologist who lives and works in Lyon. Welcome back, everybody. Alessandro, I was actually thinking as I said the intro, we should have a podcast episode on when does the title change from church planter to just merely pastor of a church.
That's a whole topic for an episode.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, that would be a fun one to wrestle with. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing well. I just came back from the States and to see my kids again and to see my wife. I was only gone for a week, but it felt like a lifetime. So it's good to be back with them, to be back in routine.
Wait, you went to the States to see your wife?
No. When I came back, I just came back from the States.
Okay.
I was in the States for a whole week. Unfortunately, we had a family death, and so we both prayed about it and felt that I should go. It's in the side of my family, and so I got to go there. I really thank God for my time there. But nevertheless, I missed my family back here in Italy, and so when I came back, my daughter running to me and hugging me and everything, and then my son unfortunately was sick, but he fell asleep in my lap, and so it was just good to be back home.
Yeah. So I've had a crazy busy travel schedule this fall, and I just got home from my final trip last Friday. So it feels really good to be home. And I also am sort of feeling that like letdown of adrenaline, which is usually when I get sick. So I'm trying to be really careful with the vitamin C and attentive to all of that. Because I don't know about you guys, but I've been since September in 4 different continents and 5 different countries. And it's just been a lot of time changes and weather changes and going and going and going. So yeah.
Well, and lots of people means increased opportunity to catch something and trapped on
and
those
places.
Steel tube airplanes, even
Exactly.
recycled air, all that stuff. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. It's been a crazy period for us as well. We landed 2 new couples, so as the leader, obviously I needed to be involved in that. And then, like 2 days after one of the couples landed, was in a bad car accident. That's right. I'm okay, but it's been a headache to deal with the bureaucracy and the red tape of trying to figure all that out. And then 2 days after that was supposed to lead our staff retreat.
Oh, that's right.
And ended up with my wife and my son getting very sick. So we were isolated in the room for basically 2 out of the 3 days of the staff retreat. So it has been a crazy, crazy season. I don't know what that means. Someone was saying, you guys must be doing something good if the enemy's just throwing all these things at you. And then someone else framed it in a different way and said, what is God teaching you in these things? So I was like, okay, I have this back and forth. What is, but it's been nice. God's just done some cool things, like brought the right people around at the right time. It's been good to see things play out and everyone's still moving forward. It's just we've taken a lot of hits. So but we're excited. I'm excited to be back into this rhythm, hopefully, of recording podcast and getting these out. I was actually looking at our stats, and there was a boost in listeners this fall, so that's been awesome. And hopefully, if you have the time, you'll shoot us an email or send us a comment so that we can get to know some of you a little bit better. But this is season 3, episode 5, and today we're tackling a controversial topic, as is per our season theme. And yeah, we're going to dive into short-term teams and internships. So essentially people that aren't serving overseas for long periods of time. And we touched on this a little bit before in season 2. We did a mini series on it. We interviewed Jesse Cruz, who leads a ministry that focuses on short-term trips. But this episode, we're going to look at it more through that lens that we've already talked about of dilemma or taboo. We want to talk about, like, is it actually helpful? Is it not? This kind of thing. Some of the controversial aspects that go around short-term teams. And so I guess just to kick us off and dive right in with the first question, we've all either been in a short-term team or we've hosted some form of short-term team or internships as well. We might end up talking more about short-term teams, but we're meaning internships as well, people that go by themselves. So being honest, guys, have you ever felt or had the thought that maybe the money that was spent on a short-term trip, the travel costs, the logistics, the accommodations and food and all the different things that go into it, insurances, could have been better invested into a long-term ministry effort or project?
Well, for me, I'll start off by taking the stance of saying no. I never felt that. That is when I'm evaluating a trip that went accordingly, and we'll talk more about what that means. Like, what do we mean when something is done the right way? Obviously, anything can be done the wrong way, and then you think about, okay, that was money wasted. I think just from the beginning, when I became a Christian, I remember the story in Matthew 26 when Jesus says, the poor will always be among you. And the reason that context of that has to do with the lady wasting a good set of perfume on Jesus. And they were like, you should have sold that. That could have been used differently. And no, God's economy works different. God's finances, the way if he wants to put money there. So I never saw it as wasted. People waste money all the time for different things. And so if it's invested the right way, you spend $5,000, you spend $10,000. If it's invested the right way, for me, I always never saw it as a waste. I'm a big space fanatic, and there was always the controversial about like sending rockets, this and that. Was that a waste? In one sense, some people see it as a waste. There's food hunger here, this and that. But man, a lot of good came out of that with technology, innovation, and understanding how things work. And so it's how you see it. And if the goal is correct, and that you're investing, then I never saw it as a waste.
I think that's such a healthy perspective, Alessandro. I love how you bring in that balance. And yeah, I love the space program analogy because it's true. Also, it just even enlarges vision and hopefulness when you think of things like going to the moon and those projects, right? And that's some of what a short-term mission can do. It can enlarge a church's vision and inspire, broader thinking and things like that. And those are intangibles and they're hard to measure financially. So I think that's helpful. And I don't know that I could look at a specific trip that I've been a part of or say, oh gosh, that was a waste of money. I think for me, the bigger challenge is if I'm looking at church's overall budget and the line item dedicated to missions. And if there's a heavy slant towards short-term efforts with a declining investment in long-term efforts, that for me would be cause for concern and cause for question and maybe an opportunity to reframe what are the priorities here and what are we investing in. So I wouldn't look at it in a case by case, was this worth it or not worth it. I do think that organizationally, when you're looking at larger chunks of money and overall annual budgets, we should take a critical eye to it and think, how's the balance of the investment here?
Yeah. For me, I guess I'll be the one that says I have thought. I have had that thought. I definitely have wondered. I was on a trip before, and I was part of the leadership team, and so it was like my first time, and I got to be exposed to like the amount of money that we were raising, not just individually as members on the trip, but then I found out later that the church also was like, in a sense, being charged a fee by the missionaries. So like they were having to give above and beyond what they were planning on, and I was like, wow, that's interesting. And then when I got to the ground and saw kind of how things were moving, I thought, wow, we were working alongside some local guys that were helping as translators and stuff and drivers of the vehicles. And I was like, man, we could have probably just given money to him, and he could have done this, even without our help here in some cases where it was like heavily oral and like needed the language and those kind of things. The manual labor, we were helpful for the manual labor, but so I did think that. Now, having been on the other side and being the person who hosts missions teams,
you charge double now, right?
Yes. No, I do think that there's something to that. Like at first I was put off by the fact that they were charging almost like a fee of sorts, but then I was like, no, like now being on the other side, I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of work that like, goes into the prep, and like, here where we're at in a big metropolitan city, like housing is super hard. So you spend a lot of time just trying to find housing solutions and stuff. And so I was like, you know what, actually, I do think that there's something to this idea of like, there should be almost almost a fee. I don't like using that word. I prefer to use something else, but
honorarium.
Something, a gift given. And some people do that naturally, and they just are very generous when they're on a trip. But other people, you need that built into the to the budget that they're raising. But on the other side, I've saw like and I'm sure we'll get into this more, but the different impact that people have when they go on a short-term trip, or that the trip in and of itself has on different communities, whether it be the sending community or the receiving community. I don't know that I would say that it would be better invested in long-term efforts, but it definitely, we could learn ways to stretch, to make it less expensive for the short term. And then hopefully that would mean those churches would have the money to give more towards the long-term efforts, kind of to your point, Jen.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because the long term is, I don't know about you guys, but I've been on the field for 15 years. It's hard to maintain support for 15 years. I don't even know people over there anymore. So when my supporters pass away or have to stop giving for some reason or another, finding replacements are hard. And short term is like, everybody, these kids, they're your neighbors, they're, right there. And I would be prone to want to give to that because it's so familiar and you can see the impact in the person. But when you're gone and out of sight and out of mind for so long, it really does get hard. So, I mean, this touches on one of the deepest criticism that surrounds short-term missions. So, I guess we should define terms. When we say short-term missions, what are we talking about? Technically, I think short-term is considered anything shorter than 3 months, although the vast majority of short-term mission trips are closer to 2 weeks long. From what I know and understand about having to learn and understand culture, I actually think anything shorter than 2 years is what we call midterm, can fall into this category on some levels. So it's difficult to say exactly what we're talking about. But the number of North American short-term people going overseas or leaving their country borders, I should say, because a lot of times from the U.S. it's to Mexico, not overseas. But the estimates range from 1 million to 4 million people. That's a ton. And a lot of research says that these mission trips fail to achieve what their stated objectives are. So they don't necessarily see life change. They don't necessarily... one of the big arguments is that if we send people on short-term missions, they'll get a taste for it and a flavor of it, and this will cause more people to go long-term. That does not pan out in the statistics anywhere. It's been measured in 2 major studies to see if, short-term missions causes people. Now, most people who are going to go long-term missions might do a short-term mission to test it out or try it, but that wasn't the cause. So correlation doesn't equal causation, and that's one of the reasons this misconception has been perpetuated. So so there's some people who do ask, like, man, the millions, maybe even billions of dollars spent on this short-term investment, could it be better invested in long-term efforts? For me, it's a question of reframing. So just as we talked about the going to the moon, I think if we are asking short-term missionaries to have some sort of lasting impact in a place, we're asking for the wrong thing. If we're envisioning, and I've even encouraged my sending church to not call it short-term missions when they come here, we call it a ministry exchange. And if we see it as people from the church in one country coming to another place to see how God is at work and discover what God is up to, and do some prayer walking and praying with locals, and maybe opening some doors for opportunities by doing a summer sports camp, or by doing an arts and crafts fair, or by doing some things that could stimulate some interaction in the community that could support local efforts. Those can be some valuable contributions, but ultimately, if we're looking for impact on the ground, seeing people come to faith, grow in their faith, become wholehearted followers of Christ, that's not usually the outcome of short-term missions.
Despite popular belief. I think I was thinking as you were saying that, Jen, and I'd have to do research, so I don't know, maybe it does exist, but I'd be curious to if there was like somewhere a graph or a timeline laid out of like what we have examples of Paul's ministry trips and different things showing the amount of time spent in different places and different, because I think sometimes we read and we think like things happen instantly, like, and we see these, televangelists on TV, or we hear these like crusades and things. It's like, oh, they came and they did this huge thing in just a weekend, so we can go and do something similar. And yeah,
but on the flip side, I can't tell you how many Christians I've met in France that came to faith through a Billy Graham crusade. So I don't want to minimize what God can do. But I also have been part of Billy Graham crusades way back in the day, where I know how well organized those were, how interconnected they were with the local church, how much they were mobilizing the local church for follow-up and for ongoing discipleship. So that that's a form of evangelism we don't see very often anymore, these sort of citywide crusades and things like that. They have had impact in the past. But we've also gotten a lot more savvy culturally, because there's also cultures that you go to where out of politeness, people will appear to respond a certain way to an outsider presenting a message or offering a thought or a belief, and whole communities will appear to come to the Lord, but you realize that actually was just their culture being polite. So we have to be really careful.
Well, and that's one of the things I was going to say too is, they did they don't call them crusades anymore. Now they call them festivals, but they did a festival here in Italy, and they were here doing prep work for over a year before it actually happened. So it wasn't short term, even though the event was one day.
And their investment is in local church leaders, local church denominations, mobilizing on the ground. So that's a different investment than thinking we're going to come in, we're not going to connect with the local church or where God's already at work, and we're just going to start announcing the gospel apart from that. That's a whole different scenario. And I'd like to say that isn't happening anymore, but it is. There was a guy, I got contacted by the director of the National Council of French Evangelicals a couple of years ago, because some random person who had some random connection to Francis Chan was organizing Francis Chan coming to France and doing all this stuff. And it was completely outside of any connection within the local church. And he was like, what is going on? And how do we do this? And like, so there are still realistically attempts for people to come in and sort of do this cowboy, I know what this country needs and we're going to bring it in, and without networking and really, Yeah,
and I think it also, that's why it's so important, I think, the prep work that goes in before, and like the training, the expectations that are set. we get a lot of requests for people to send teams, and I always ask who is coming on these teams, because the idea of just posting like, oh, we're gonna do this team they're gonna go to serve in Rome. Like, we don't just want anybody from the congregation that's willing to come. No offense to anybody, but we want a team to come that's going to have a shared set of skills that can be used for whatever purposes we're going to do. So one school reached out to us and I said, well, we want people then to come that are either musicians or that are in videography. Those are the two skill sets they need to have. So if they don't have those skill sets, we don't just want anybody willing to come. We want people with those skill sets for a project that we want to do. And I think we have to, I think sometimes, myself included, get this impression that because there's a request to do something and we're the missionary that's based off of support, we have to say yes. We have to receive whatever help they want to send. But I think it's healthy to be able to push back and say, well, actually, for us, it's not beneficial to just receive a group. Or if it is beneficial, this are the parameters around how do you set that so that the financial cost that it is, like we were saying, is actually used towards something that's meaningful and impactful, not just, for lack of better image, painting the church building again or whatever, common thing,
Yeah, I think from there's always going to be, like, we want to be strategic and we want to be efficient about what we do, both from the side of the going and the receiving end. So absolutely, Jesse, I agree with the idea of like, okay, we don't need carpenters, we need musicians. So obviously that's those are good questions to ask, who's coming. But ultimately what I've found, I've hosted a lot of short terms, attitude is really what is the key. Like, I've met people who, like, they felt like, I can't offer anything, but their attitude was the greatest thing because they were willing to serve. And including myself, when I first went to short term to Cambodia, I felt like I was a new Christian, couldn't offer anything, but I was able to do whatever, and was, very helpful in that case. And so I think the wrong attitude would be the savior complex attitude, sort of I'm coming in because I'm better, I'm the savior, versus the servant attitude is what we're looking for. I might be really good at this, but you are the expert. Help me figure out where I could go, what to do. And so just remembering John the Baptist saying, you yourself have said, I'm not the Messiah. And so realizing that we're not the Messiah. When we come in, we're there to be a servant, to join in what God is already doing. And so very important. So yes, I agree 100% that if we could be specific, absolutely. But I think, it's hard to know people's attitudes when they're not here yet, but really, like, maybe informing the team leader, like, keep track of, like, are these people really coming for the right reasons? Do they know why they're coming? To kind of catch the right attitudes, and then pray that God does bring the right people in that sense, not just in skill set, but in attitude wise, spiritually prep for doing what God is calling them to do.
Yeah, that's really good. One of the trips I was just on I was in Seoul, South Korea for the World Evangelical Alliance General Assembly. It was quite an experience, and it was actually really a privilege to be there. There's like the whole global church, and I got to sit on the missions commission and kind of hear and learn and listen with a global perspective on where missions has been and where they'd like to go and all of that. So it was overall a positive experience. But one of the things that really challenged me was they had as their keynote speaker Rick Warren, which, if you don't know, Rick Warren is a well-known megachurch pastor from the United States. And he's a great guy, and I've read his books, and, I don't want to knock Rick Warren. However, there was a lot of cultural tone deafness that came across from the stage. And here we were again with a white Western male getting the most time on the platform, even though we were in Seoul, South Korea, at a church of 100,000 people, like, that was hosting us. So he told a story of when he was on a short-term trip to Korea and shared the gospel with no language skills. And I just remember afterwards how many people inside conversations just expressed this cringing feeling around that whole story of how he went about it, and not for lack of joy that God can save someone despite the fact that we don't even speak the language or don't do missions well. That, of course, we praise God for. But more that as he told that story, it seemed it to be sort of a validation of the process of just show up and do whatever and don't, you don't have to worry about learning language or speaking the heart language. You can't listen to someone if you don't speak their language. So he could share the 4 spiritual laws going through by pointing at her reading something in Korean, but he couldn't hear her heart and show her love and ask her questions. You know what I mean? So just the methodology that he spoke of with quote unquote successful results, right? Was a big challenge to people. And it's often the type of methodologies that are employed for those who come with a savior complex, like you were saying, Alessandro, and think, well, I have the answers, so I don't need to ask the questions. I just need to give you the answers. And so anyways, that was an interesting, very current picture to me that these mindsets are still present.
Yeah, the idea of the purpose for going behind, but then also, I guess that kind of brings us to this next point that we want to talk about a little bit, is like, what is our dilemma that we face as long-term missionaries? Because we're having to make the decisions. Like, do we receive people? How do we receive people? That tension is real. And I think kind of to your story that you're sharing, Jen, and what I was saying earlier, like we have this tension of like, there's a burden, there's financial burden, there's a logistical, work, there's time and energy that's spent. And then there's also this idea of purpose. Like, what is the purpose behind these trips? We've alluded to it already. Some people seem to think that the purpose is to save souls when they go on these trips. Others understand that their purpose is more to serve and to encourage the local believers that they're going to be working alongside on these trips. Oftentimes, this is part of the dilemma that we face, is that there's a lack of training, there's a lack of cultural sensitivity, and sometimes it's not because the people don't want to or aren't willing to. It's just a question of time, a question of experience. Like, there's just so many factors that go into it. Like you were saying earlier, and we'll get into in a minute, being in a place for only 2 weeks or only 2 months or only 1 year or 2 years, your knowledge, your ability to navigate that culture still is really young. We wouldn't expect, like a 2-year-old to understand everything about what's happening around them culturally, just like we wouldn't understand or expect, a 2-year intern or something to that effect. And so I would be curious to hear from you guys too, kind of what are some of the thoughts and dilemmas that you're facing as you're making those decisions? I shared a little bit mine, and how I really had to come to grips with the idea of like, I can't please everybody. I can't, just accept everybody. I have to kind of put parameters on what type of people. I have to be very clear up front that, we're not in a handicap friendly setting, so we don't actually have, like, it would be really hard for us in our situation to have people in wheelchairs or things, because there's a lot of walking, the streets are not maintained well, like there's a lot of problems to that. Also, like skill sets, we're not in a third world country where maybe there are more hands-on manual labor type jobs. We're in a place where they have those services, and if anything, we would probably get in trouble for doing them without hiring locals or going through the proper channels. So really, we need more people that have oral skills or some sort of artistic skill that can be used and expressed to bring people in. And then those of us who are local can engage them and talk with them. And in fact, little parentheses here, we had a team that we recruited around music that came. They did a concert. During that concert, there was a young lady that 2 years prior, when another member of that team had been here for music again, she had heard about that music but didn't get a experience it. So this was like for her, she was there in tears because 2 years later, the guy was back singing and she was like moved by his music. And then that team left and we lost contact with that young lady. And then yesterday, literally yesterday, we were on the bus, my wife and I, and she sits down next to me. We had no idea. And I was like, wait, I know you. And it turned out she remembered and we were able to have a great conversation. But it was just, those are the types of things that short-term teams have. But it was because we had formed a team that was here for a specific purpose that met a felt need in the community. Yeah. So I find myself having to weigh that dilemma back and forth. Like, what's the purpose of the people coming? And then also timing. Like, I have to say no to a lot of people that want to come during like summer things, because our ministries, the way that we're doing ministry right now, it's not as conducive to receiving people in the summer. Right. Whereas, in the winter or in the spring is the best, because that's when most of our activities are going and we can insert people into what we're already doing. I'd be curious to know for you guys, like, what are some of the challenges you face as you're making those decisions?
So in my case, as a church planter, but this is not only exclusive to church planters, is the dilemma of dependency. As a church plant at the beginning, absolutely, I needed short-term missionaries or even long-term to partner alongside me to help me really get the church going. But as the church is growing, you want to kind of shift that and have more of our people do the work. But the thing is, because you've started out with short terms and they've kind of become part of the culture, to really make sure that our church is not dependent on them. For example, we just had a wonderful church retreat, our first church retreat this summer, and we had missionaries support us or come into a short-term mission team, come to lead it and to help. But I already set up the expectation that no, next year we're going to kind of do it ourselves. This was just to kind of get us kickstarted. So as long as you kind of set it up well, but at the end of the day, there's, people have their own thoughts. You could say something 1,000 times, but they can still feel dependent. What? No missionaries? No short-term teams are coming this year? Are we going to do it ourselves? So making sure that we don't build a culture of dependency where we can't function without the help of outside help, including ourselves, right? As missionaries. I told you guys I went to the States this past week, and something beautiful happened. We already had events planned, and of course I was going to be heavily involved in them, but because I wasn't there, the church had to step up, and I was just so blessed to see the locals really take over the work, and they did a way better job. We had 2 new families come to church this past Sunday, and I was like, see, when I'm gone, great things happen. I should be gone more often. So it's actually beautiful to see the church not needing to depend on, collaborate, that's a different story, but to depend on, we don't want dependency.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I think for me it is that training piece. And when I've had opportunities to work with teams leading up, to prepare them, to talk about the attitude, to talk about what it will look like to come and be in France and to serve here, it's gone really well. And I also appreciate the reality that it's a discipleship opportunity for the person going, and there is real value in that. So I don't think we have to downplay or eliminate short-term trips because they benefit the goer. I just think we need to make sure that we understand that that's an outcome we're looking for and working towards, and want to build and encourage and minimize maybe the idea that they're going to the lost heathen and they're going to in 2 weeks, save souls. That can happen. God can do that. God can open all sorts of doors. But I think just giving people a broader worldview and a vision for what God is doing around the world and how the faith looks in different places and how it's incarnated in different ways is helpful for individuals and for the global church. I think of even just like this past weekend, we had a prospective missionary staying with us with a different organization, not our organization, but we have room to host her, and being able to be part of her process of discovery and her thinking and her discernment and her praying and those sorts of things. That's valuable to me too. So I think I also had to just adjust my mindset and my heart and my attitude somewhat in receiving. And that's sort of the internal piece for me. I can get to where we don't need your help. We've got it covered. And I think, no, we do. We need the encouragement like Jesse's talked about. Sometimes we just need people to come and pray with us, and even to put new eyes on the work that we're doing, because it can be long and hard and frustrating, and you can feel like you're not doing anything. And then someone else comes and says, wow, you guys have done all this and you're doing all this. Wow. So it just having a fresh look at what we're doing can be helpful, and sometimes some fresh ideas. So it's been good work for me too, to sort of ask God, what are you asking of me in this welcoming process and in this receiving process and in this encouraging process?
Wow. How valuable is that to be able to stay with you while they're praying, to realize that this is where God's leading them. They get to see what life looks like. I think that's so amazing. I think another dilemma, if you're thinking about maybe you're listening missionary, you just started and you're kind of like, okay, I'm about to have a team come in, or you're descending church and you're kind of saying we're about to go. And you alluded to this, Jesse, where I think you have to just be clear about the financial aspect of things. At the beginning, I've had moments like, wait, who's paying for this? Who's taking care of this financially, mostly financially speaking. It gets tricky. Like, okay, I'll book the hotel for you guys, but am I going to get reimbursed? It's a huge weight on us. And so kind of just being honest and clear about who's taking care of the meals. Because, especially if you don't have the budget for that, and then you're hosting a team of 10 people, a team of 15, to kind of just realize. And sometimes you kind of assumption, can lead to thinking that of course they're going to pay for it. They're coming here, and they're like thinking, no, we've always have had it where the hosting a missionary takes care of the meals. So just be clear about these things, because it would be very sour afterwards when they come, and you have to kind of don't know who's paying for what.
Yeah, it's definitely important to keep the meals and who's paying for the meals straight. That's the most important piece.
When I did it, I did a budget that worked out. I don't know. It was really funny because I did put people in homestays, which reduced hotel costs, and some meal costs. And then everybody got an envelope with the number of metro tickets they should need in it, with enough euros for the meals out, which they had raised the funds based on their budget, though. I did all of this. And at the end of the day, so everybody, it was sort of like, this is your, when the meals are on your own, this is the euros you have for it. And that's it. It's finished. Like after that, it's on you, because that's what you raised. And then what was funny is with that trip, I came in like $1,500 under budget for the whole trip across the 10 people, and they gave that to me as in my support account, like as you came in under budget, like here's what you told us we needed a budget for the trip, here's what everyone raised, and then you came in under budget. So that was kind of fun.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Well, I think hopefully the message has been clear today, that we're not saying you throw the baby out with the bathwater. We do believe that short-term missionaries, whether they be for 2 weeks or 2 years, have a role to play in what God's doing in the world. And we do want to do missions with short-term missionaries. But it is important to set expectations. It is important to not just assume that if you're sending a group somewhere, that just going to be only a blessing to the people receiving, because it also will have some burdens and some challenges. And so to think, how do we lessen the burdens? It's going to, no matter what, the missionaries receiving help are going to have to shoulder some extra responsibilities during that season, and that's okay. But we want to make sure that that's clear and that everyone understands what they're getting themselves into. And we would encourage everybody to, have plenty of conversations in advance to set those expectations, to help people so that they can be set up for success when they do show up. And part of setting up for success is determining ahead of time, what does success look like? Is that seeing souls saved, or is that seeing smiles on the local church and the missionaries that you're encouraging and uplifting and serving alongside? Or is it both? So we are hopeful that this was helpful to all of you who are listening, and that you see just this raw, honest conversation that we had about our experiences as being beneficial. I will apologize before we exit for any siren noise. I don't know how well we'll be able to get some of that out, but it has been, I don't know what's going on in Rome right now, but there's been sirens this whole recording. And so we will try to edit those out, but if we can't, I apologize for that background. It's just part of the context we live in. Thank you all for tuning in to today's episode. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and found it insightful. Your ministry is important, and we hope that you consider your time with us as an investment in your work. Don't forget to subscribe. Please leave a review or a comment, and share this podcast with your friends, with your pastors, with others in your community. And until next time, keep going wherever God leads you.